Welcome. This is Money Heart, where we explore the emotional side of money. I'm Camille Diaz, and today we're discussing the emotional side of time. My guest is Conrad Ruiz. He's the founder of Well Aware and co-founder of Introde. Conrad studied biomedical engineering after he was made aware that he had only one kidney with multiple cysts. Rather than continue down his path of study, Conrad's ultimate reflections on struggling with his and his father's health led him to focus more on time and time management. Conrad, welcome to Money Heart.
Thank you, Camille. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so glad to have you on the show. And as we kind of alluded to there in the title, we focus on the emotional side of money, but we decided to call this episode the emotional side of time. How did we get to that?
So I guess during our conversation earlier about, being a guest on the show, you asked me a little bit more about, what kind of subject matter I would broach about when it comes to money and talking about the emotional side of money. And for me, I sort of when it comes to looking at money, I really look at time as a pretty much a kind of an operator behind money and behind income. And it's something that I think a lot of us, recognize as the other account in our lives, one that we certainly cannot deposit any more into than we currently have. And I don't know, I think it's a very unique factor in our worlds. I think time is something that we sometimes treat almost as emotionally, if not more emotionally than money. And it can have a similar effect on clouding our judgments, our ability to do things and see things clearly. And I just thought it was worth having a similar conversation around the emotions of time. So
I love that. Yeah. So let's talk about this concept of, that common phrase, time is money.
Yeah. So I think time is money is something that we've said, especially in American culture, where, we realize every hour on the clock is something that if we're not generating an income through, then we're expensing, right? And we sort of look at this infinite opportunity cost, if you will, of all the things that we could do with our hour and how we can go about generating the most income from that. And granted, I'm doing this without kind of putting any preface around like, well, what's the service or what are you offering? Or are you, is this passive income or active income and all these kind of things. I mean, there's so many different ways that I think people try to get end up getting really emotional about like how they go about generating income. But I think the underlying premise of that is that we are all under this pressure, this societal pressure that our time is our money and we need to figure out a way to make the most of it or the most out of it. And so whether as a means to an end, frankly, not often as an end in itself, we are often trading time for money. And well, I think we all know very well to each of our own extent what the consequences are of that.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So that concept of, because you just said a whole bunch of things, passive income, active income. I loved what you called it, and I've already forgotten the word, like an infinite something currency.
Infinite opportunity cost, right? So
infinite opportunity cost, yes.
Yeah. There, if you said I could spend an hour reading a book, okay, well, the infinite opportunity cost is there are an infinite number of things else I could have done that would have quote unquote generated a certain return on my time or return on value. Like we like to think of it as a return on interest, right? So typically books and readings and studying as an activity of our time, it tends to be something that generates a much longer term effect. It's something that we have to see paid forward much, much later in our time. Typically, I mean, there could be a situation where it's like, I need to figure out how to solve this problem. And if I do, I'll make $1,000 and the answer is in this book. Okay, cool, great. Your ROI is the second you finish figuring out the problem and solve it, that's your ROI right there. But for the most part, a lot of activities tend to take a little bit longer. And when we look at the infinite opportunity costs perspective on the emotion side, a lot of people I think can get caught up in saying, well, I just spent my hour doing this. Was that the most productive use of my time? Was that the best way I could spend my time? Did that generate the greatest ROI? If not now, in the future, and especially when people are trying to rest or when they need to rest and they're trying not to rest, they're trying to be more productive still, that's usually where that infinite opportunity cost loop really starts to, the emotional side of that loop really starts to come into play. And people be like, man, I really didn't generate ROI in this past hour or that past time. And I think that really sucks.
So do you think, because I would postulate that there are diminishing returns on something like, yes, okay, on something like sleep. So, because I love that example of rest. Well, if I stay up and work another hour, I can earn X more dollars by doing, whatever I'm billing my clients for, or making another product or whatever it
and
is.
in turn, you may lose more hours later on the next day.
Right.
So you may create diminishing returns into the future. Maybe you may be running into a sort of time debt, if you will, that you'll have to pay off later. We talk about that with sleep a lot. We talk about sleep debt a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that whole concept of, okay, so I've spent an hour now working longer when my body was telling me I needed sleep. So I didn't. But now the next morning, I'm attempting to be productive and the on switch is nowhere to be found.
You paid for it. That was there. You as we call it, you burnt the midnight oil, right? That oil was meant for the next day.
Yes, I like that way of thinking about it, because I think we do think, oh, burning the midnight oil. We didn't think, oh wait, that was tomorrow's ration.
Yeah. That was the morning gas.
Yeah, that was the gas for the morning. And 3 cups of coffee will not make up for 1 cup of midnight oil.
It will make you alive, awake, alert, but not enthusiastic.
Yes, like the song. Yes, not enthusiastic at all. And in fact, I see that happen pretty often. I think people will have that sort of drag on a Monday or a Friday or whatever day of the week that they've overextended themselves, and then try to make up for it with something else, when what they're really trying to make up for is misappropriated time, perhaps.
I would say there's a balance that's hard to constantly keep on one side. So it's really hard to consistently overwork. At some point, your body and your brain just decide almost against you on a conscious level to be like, nope, sorry, we're gonna do things. And usually what this ends up doing is this ends up reverting people to poor comfort habits and poor choices that are going to end up costing them further down the line. One way of describing this, there's a guy I really admire who kind of speaks a lot about this philosophically. His name is Josh Cherry. And what he does is he talks about the sort of ups and downs of one's progress. And if you sort of look at it like a chart, the goal is obviously to go from the bottom left to the top right as much as you possibly can. Or sorry for the Zoom folks here, the reverse camera screen, we're going to go that way. So what ends up happening is you kind of go up and then you go down and up, down, up, down. And what sucks is in these sort of jagged experiences of like, it's really trying to push discipline, and then your body and brain are like, no more, boom, you go right back down into chaos, because that's what you're craving, and then you try to go back up again, and it sucks. Like, it's just a lot of demand upon you on both ends to go all the way up and then go like, yes, I'm at the peak, and then crashing all the way back down and coming back up. Josh, what I love is he says, hey, smooth it out. Once you're reaching that point of the sort of the peak of your discipline, as you've been able to stand it, and start to invite some chaos and sort of lower things down, smooth out the peak of that ride, and then come back down. But then as you reach the trough and things start to get really chaotic, you go, no, I'm going to bring things back into discipline again. And it's just a much smoother way of going about the experience of your time. And again, to the emotional side of that, I think it just does a world of wonders to minimize the suffering that is going to end up being humanity anyway. So
So really recognizing when you were starting to get a little too far out of balance and saying, okay, let me kind of come back to the middle somewhere. And then if you start to get too far out of balance the other way, going back, because I could see this easily happening even with the sleep thing. It's like, I'm not going to sleep for several days on end, or not sleep enough, not like not sleep at all, but 4 or 5 hour range instead of 7 8 hour range. And then by the weekend, okay, well, now I'm just going to sleep for 12 hours every night or something like that.
I recognize that a lot in folks who have really demanding weekday jobs. I'm not even going to call them 9 to 5. That's not what they are. They are 8 to 7. They're 7 to 7.
It's like 5 to 9.
Yeah. And not PM to AM. Well, if that was the real case, I mean, we'd be in a whole other world of problems. But yeah, I would say that design in particular, it's really destructive. I mean, it's really, really, really destructive. It always lends itself at the end of time for most people to be like, this sucks. I can't keep doing this. Or people just end up shutting down and end up just being less productive overall. I think in response to that right now, there's been a big push towards creating, the 3-day weekend or the 4-day work week.
Mm-hmm.
And also even within that, minimizing the time within that work week to not be, an 8-hour stretch, but rather, broken down whatever way people makes it work. I mean, remote work has allowed this to be more receptive and more opportunistic. At the end of the day, it's just get the job done and show up at meetings when people need to show up to, and obviously don't overdo meetings. But beyond those little tactical details, I think just working less and getting more stuff done, that's what really matters. Time does not, you can't just put in more time. In a similar way, you can't just put in more money to solve a problem sometimes. Sometimes you have to do it right. You have to put in the right money towards the right things, to put the right time towards the right things. And there is an optimal, or at least there is a better way of doing things typically, at the very least when we're looking at the 9 to 5, 5 to 5-2 work week kind of day job. There's definitely a better way to do that.
I like that concept that you said of you can't just put in more time, you can't just put in more money. I feel like that's something that even I've fallen into, is like, well, if I just had a little bit more time to spend on this, I could make it work. Not always the case, huh?
Not always the case. Sometimes putting in less time is the solution.
Yeah.
Being more scrappy with how you invest into something from a money standpoint is the solution.
Mm-hmm.
Because it begets creating a different sort of value. You end up creating something that you wouldn't otherwise do so because you created a different constraint.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the last minute final exam paper or project or presentation. We have to present this tomorrow at work, so I guess I'm going to get it done.
Now that was really interesting. And those kind of deadlines, I mean, there's some really cool stories out there about people who've been like, I waited until the very last minute and I've never written something so spectacular. I've also seen horror stories of that, right? That starts to get into the conversation around like flow. And there are some folks who in that state of desperation and urgency, like their skill set and their abilities and the amount of time that they truly had, it wasn't so unreasonable that it was challenging, but it wasn't outwardly over their limit of skill and talent. Like it wasn't out of their range. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, surprisingly, as much as it looked like they were doing these last minute, honestly, they put in just the right amount of time with just the right amount of pressure, which happened to be a lot. And frankly, if you ask those people after, so what happened after? Crashed and burned for a little while. Like it's just recovery mode. And that was the other thing that I was going to say is in terms of planning for your time towards these kind of moments where you're not expecting to have a lot of sleep, to all the parents out there, you're not expecting to have, you're expecting to have a really, tough couple days ahead. Okay, well, plan for the week thereafter to be a lot more relaxed.
Right.
Like give yourself crests and troughs, because if you just try to constantly hit crests, you're going to end up crashing really, really, really hard. Sometimes it's hard to get out of that.
Yeah, it is. It really is. So I love that you brought this up because this is something I'm putting into my next book of having these, I call them race blocks and then cruise blocks. So you have those times that you're really going, and then you have those times that we're just going to put it on like cruise control and not quit working, but not go full out as much as we can, stay up late, pressure ourselves type of thing. And then my third one, of course, is the rest block, which is like vacation. You're just done, totally off. So,
Yeah. But
yeah,
it's not that you're not being productive. In
right.
fact, those are incredibly productive states of mind. Um, it may not make sense at the surface when you look at it. It may not look like drinking a Mai Tai at the beach is productive. Um, but if you look at it from a broader standpoint of time and say, well, by investing in this rest, I'm able to show up for several months thereafter
Hmm.
with incredible performance. Okay, good. And that was well worth its time and money.
Right.
Um, but I think we get too caught up in the short term.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent point, too, is because you said you called the rest an investment. So by investing in the rest time, by investing in the more relaxed time, we basically put a down payment on the productive time being more productive.
Yep. Yep. And it's a deposit, if you will, in some senses. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Either a refill or a deposit, or maybe some of both.
Hey, whatever floats your boat,
Yeah.
whatever jives with you on the mindset side of it. I think we are at some point we spend so much time trying to find the right words for it. It's like, no, just experience it. You'll
Yeah.
get it. You'll feel it. You'll know when you're doing it, because you'll be able to show up.
Right. Which is really the critical thing of the whole idea of balancing time and what we're doing and where we're investing our time is to truly show up wherever it is we choose to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say showing up at our best, showing up with reasonability. I mean, it's one thing. I remember I really made a bad choice when I was in my junior year of college, and I was choosing between. I had lined up a research opportunity that was not going to pay me anything, but it was right next to home, and it was super cool. I was going to figure out how to stabilize rat brains, so that we could throw electrical conduits through them. It was wild.
Hmm.
Um, I had to choose between that and a $28 an hour internship an hour east, which would have been a painful traffic ride to and from home every day. Um, I think I chose poorly for money over time in that very particular instance. And I think about it a lot. But one of the things I really hated was when I showed up to that, when I showed up to that internship, there would be days where I was just so exhausted from having to wake up so early to do that morning drive. My roommates weren't the best at that time either. They were having a lot of fun, and that didn't help me sleep.
Right.
So I would show up and I would frankly fall asleep at meetings, and people would be like, "What's going on?" It's like, "What? I'm here." It's like, "No, you're not. You're physically here, but you might as well be mentally somewhere else, like in your bed." And I think that's another way to kind of look at that at showing up. Like, um, you have to be present.
Yeah. Yeah. All the way
You
present.
all the way present. You be here, like make sure you're doing the things that allow you to be here, because that's what creates the most value for the time. No
Right.
matter what the time is, rest time, active time, productive time, exercise, nutrition, be here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking about that in terms of family time.
Mm,
People, showing up and while I left and I came to the baseball game, or I'm here at the movie, or I'm at the dinner table. But if you're so wrapped up on all the other things, then you're not really.
yeah. Yeah. You didn't really invest that time.
Hmm.
You weren't actually there. Therefore, from a time standpoint, you might as well have not actually have been there.
Right. Right. Would have been better for you to just miss it and do whatever you were doing and then come back and really be there when you were done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. As much as that may hurt you again in the short term, like stop thinking in the short term, that being there is more value, being there in physical nature is more
Right.
valuable than actually being there in spirit
Yeah.
with whatever it takes to do both.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you get into all of this time stuff? What made you sort of go down this path of thought and study?
So my sort of origin story, if you will, is I was born and raised by a guy who is now by a guy, my old man. I was born and raised by a man who is now 95 years old, and I'm 26. So to give context, that he's around 70 years old when I was born. And between me and my dad, there was always this expectation of, hurry up, kid. There's not a lot of time. I wouldn't say the pressure was insurmounting. It was just there. It was a very apparent thing. Like people would, the comments would be the thing that really would give me like a lot of highlight of awareness around like, hey, is that your grandpa? I was like, is that your old man? And I said, well, no, he's my dad. And growing up, recognizing his history and sort of our expectations about what it meant to be, an adult, what it meant to be to kind of, grow up and be mature. Like obviously there was a lot of wisdom thrown in there, that getting that from someone who's a lot older in life, there was a lot more to kind of unpack and sort of, and kind of distill. So I took on a lot of that growing up. And when I thought about, at a certain point in my time, when I thought about what I wanted to do based on that knowledge and awareness, I thought, okay, well, whatever I need to do, it needs to be successful. It needs to be successful quickly because, I want to show my old man what I've been capable of, and I want to make sure he's there to see it. Pass over to 17 years old. I ended up going to the hospital for appendicitis. It wasn't really much of a big deal. I knew what was going on. But what I didn't realize I was going to find myself in was I was in I was getting an ultrasound to make sure that I had appendicitis. And it turned out that it turned out they couldn't find one of my kidneys. And that was kind of a weird scenario to be finding myself in. So after doing a little bit more digging into that, it turned out I only had one kidney. It turned out I had one kidney and I had multiple cysts. It turns out that polycystic kidney disease is something that affects 1 in 10,000 people, and it has a high rate of creating problems for people, come their 40s, 50s. That's when the disease tends to progress a little bit further and the cysts start to grow in size and number. And, you basically go from having a kidney the size of a fist to that of a football. And obviously with that comes a lot of problems. The main one being you no longer have a functioning kidney. So the options from that point on are pretty gruesome. It's dialysis, which is, I think, a fate worse than death. And especially with the way that is being treated commercially in this country more than anything else. But the other side of the story is, you got to find a replacement. And the challenge for me is I only have one kidney. So whoever's going to replace me has to figure out how to take their one kidney, which has probably had a partner all that time, and suddenly work the function towards two kidneys, which is what my kidney has had the luxury of experiencing since day one. So needless to say, I was like, man, I am really screwed. And
that's definitely rough.
Yeah, I figured that out kind of quickly. And I was like, okay, well, it's one thing for me to try to meet my old man's expectations in the lifetime of, living to 100. Because if you look at him, I'm like, well, I'm in it for the long haul, I guess. Sure. But then realizing, okay, suddenly that's been cut in half. Now I only have half the amount of time I thought I had. Mm-hmm. Well, that's urgent.
Yeah.
So I went to go study biomedical engineering. I was like, I'm going to solve this problem. I am not going to die in 25 or so years or 30 years. And eventually I realized, like, okay, this is a big issue. Like there are so many complicated things to worry about. Like this is the whole in-depth field of study, like, nuts. And at the same time, I was then kind of thinking back, like that was the second time bomb I had. The first one is still that my old man is only with me for so long. Even if I get to the age of 40 and resolve my own problems, well, what about him? What about my time with him? Mm-hmm. So I started feeling myself being pulled in all these directions, and I wanted to appease everything. I couldn't. I wasn't smart enough to just do it all, and I really beat myself up for it. So I tried to be more productive, tried to be more efficient, tried to do more. I tried to shortcut success in whatever ways that I could. I eventually turned that into, like an entrepreneurship ploy where I just took my biomedical engineering knowledge as I understood it then and said, like, let me just do something it's not going to take me 10 years to solve, but one. And so bypassing that whole, medical device FDA, actually went into cosmetics because that turnaround time for a commercial product was so much faster. Mm-hmm. And at that point, the real irony for me was I found myself in an industry that's designed around vanity, when the one thing that mattered to me more than anything else was depth and philosophy. And it was at that point where I said, stop everything that you're doing and take a look and step back and go, like, what is really important? And when I did that, that's when suddenly I stopped looking at me and started looking at everybody else. So like, what is everyone doing with their time? Because if I'm running around with my head cut off, certainly I must be the one who's crazy. I'm like, no, everybody's crazy. Everyone's running around with their heads cut off. Everyone's doing it in different ways with different sacrifice, different means, but we are all sacrificing our time in the pursuit of some future time and some future expectation. And if anybody is like me at that point in time, they're not doing a great justice of it. They're not making a great trade. They're really paying for that opportunity cost. So I started looking at others. I eventually just started dedicating my time to helping others just directly and saying, don't worry about me. I'll be fine. What do you need with? What can I do for you? And what can I do to help you with your time? And that eventually spawned this awareness of what I eventually realized, like, oh, this is what being an entrepreneur really means. It means servicing and helping others with their needs and you can only do that when you're in a place where you can actually go about that process. You have to take care of yourself first. And that's what I eventually figured out how to do by stopping and slowing down and really thinking more about what was going on. And that became the spawn of what is now Well Aware. So at the surface, we talk about time, but the reality, we're really talking about awareness.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
That's how I got here. That's how I got into time, like as an obsessive study.
Yeah. Yeah. But what a great gift you got handed there. I just thought it's so cool.
I think you talked about this earlier, but the whole idea of the unicorn costumes, to me, I feel very rare in my circumstance that I have this situation befallen to me. Like, what's the one thing that people like to say? There's only one choice in life you don't get to make as your parents. It's who your parents are.
Yep.
Biologically speaking, of course.
Biological parents. Yeah. Very true. And how cool that, I'm just thinking about that level of wisdom that was gifted to you by having such an older parent, and thinking about myself raising my kids. We had our kids fairly young, and so they're close to becoming adults now, and they're teenagers. And I'm just thinking, like, how much smarter I am now versus when I had them. And it really, it's been the teen years. How much wiser, I guess I could say, would I be if I waited another 40 years, before having children? My gosh, I would be so much better as a parent. Like, so much better. Just
that I think is it's not the be all end all, right? And everyone gets drawn a different set of advantages. I never, for a really long time, I didn't grow up with any extent of, physical exercise or sport, because, it's not like I was playing baseball with the old man.
Right.
We had a very different type of baseball going on. It was very mental.
Yeah.
So there's sacrifices, there's opportunity costs, even in choosing to, have kids late and to take the benefits of your wisdom then, or your career progress then, and whatever you might be able to generate from there. It's all choice. But I would say, outside of this extraneous circumstance, the fact that the old man pulled something like that at 70 is pretty remarkable in itself. The other side of the story is, being imprisoned by choice, I think. And that goes back to the idea of the opportunity cost, where you have all these different options before you, but you have to choose something. Or you should get to choose something that you think makes sense, because just sitting there and consistently analyzing and thinking about it. I think the same goes, again, this goes back to the emotional side of money and time. deciding is an important factor.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the circumstances decide for you, and okay, you have to deal with that. But otherwise, if you really want to live life, you have to decide.
Right. Yeah,
So
you do. You do. And in waiting to decide usually doesn't serve you.
there are circumstances where it does, but I think for a lot of the things that people wait upon it honestly has negative value. It's like I think every financial advisor deserves this pat on the back, is when they say, if you haven't started investing already, you are killing your money, right? You are literally throwing money down the drain because you are waiting. Well, why are you waiting?
Yeah.
And
For
there's
the
such an
perfect
emotional
thing.
element
There's
to
no
that.
perfect thing.
No, why are you waiting to invest? Like it's a process of life, but there's a lot of things that usually people have to process about that in order to get through that. And I think going back to the time scenario, there's a lot of worry about, well, if I'm so busy focusing on processing my ability to handle my money, am I wasting time not making money? I'm like, wow, that is a really weird, like, you're going to have to work on that one. Trust me, the answer is there.
Yeah.
But some people get into that.
Yeah. Yeah. You get stuck in that sort of analysis loop and thinking about it and not knowing which way to go. And then end up, especially when you're talking about time, you spend all the time thinking about how you want to spend the time.
Yeah.
It's kind of painful.
Really painful. It seems so, it seems insane. It comes across that way because it is. But then you ask yourself, like, well, if you logically understand that, why are you emotionally so caught up? And what's cool is, I think, besides money and time, I think there's obviously knowledge and awareness. And once you become aware that you have an emotional issue, right, then it becomes a question of, okay, I'm not trying to solve the problem logically anymore. I have to solve the problem emotionally. Okay, well, there are people that do that. It's called therapy, right?
Yep.
And that is something to take into account. That's a solution set that you can reach out to. I think I don't know. I think it's very interesting that we kind of on this subject of emotions, we know the answer, but we don't know how to effectively utilize the answer. We don't know how to get ourselves to seek out the answer, even though we've been told it over and over again, or we know it so well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where we got to get from that point of awareness to what I like to call well awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And it just occurred to me, the whole concept of, you can bank your money, but you can't really bank your time. You can't, it goes and it's gone, and you can't save it, you can't add more. You don't know how much you have. It's just sort of a whole different.
It's a very strange banking system. If you were to try to institutionalize it, you'd be like, there's something really wrong about this place.
Right.
No one seems to know what is going on. It's like, well, yeah. It's kind of a broad guessing game.
Yeah, the ledger is there, but we can't seem to really see it.
There's no reasonable pro forma for this. No, not really.
Nope, none. This is so cool. What kind of stuff are you excited about now? What are you working on next?
So right now, in my space of time, I've been consulting people on time management with Conrad and I. One thing that I've been particularly enamored with during that process is I've had to do a lot of networking to find clients. I've had to do a lot of, I've gotten to do a lot of introductions and getting to connect people as a result. And one of the things I realized in the space of networking and network marketing and talking to other people is, we're all investing a rather large amount of time getting to know and build all these relationships. And what I find really unique is that in the span of spending all that time, we seem to be doing a certain disjustice where we're not sharing the information around who we're meeting with to the people that we've gone to meet with or are coming to meet with in a way that I think makes the most sense. I mean, it's one thing for me to sit down with you for an hour and say, Camille, here's all the 300 people that I know really, really, really well. I would drive you nuts. It'd be another thing for me to say, go onto my LinkedIn and search filter based on what you're looking for as of late. but there's challenges with that as well. So
Right.
the big thing that I'm working on is I'm building what I like to call a CRM for networking, or an NRM, if you will. It's called Intro, and it's a side project that's kind of turned into its own business at this point, something separate from Well Aware. I've got a co-founder. We're doing a lot of really cool stuff. We love networking education because, again, so much time is invested into that for a lot of people that we know. And what we really aim to do at this point, we've just finished beta. We really want to start getting people to try out our systems and really experience what we like to call like the best practices workflow of networking, where if I want to introduce you to someone, Camille, you can, you, instead of just getting an instant introduction without any context, without any details about who this person is, no, instead I send you a nice, very thoughtful, hey, I'm wondering if you're interested in this person. Here's everything you need to know about them: LinkedIn profile, intro paragraph, reason I'm trying to connect you with them. And then you tell me if you're interested. And all you have to do is click yes on my email. There's literally a hyperlink that's provided in that email that says yes or no. And if you click yes, great. If the other person clicks yes as well, you get connected. I don't have to do any of the work from there. The system follows up in 2 weeks, a month from there, saying, hey, is this relationship still working out for you? Like, what can we learn from this introduction? If it was positive or negative. And if you said no, equally so, what was it about this introduction request that wasn't a good fit for you? Let me go ahead and take that information and make better introduction in the future. And I think if we all did that, if we all sort of treated our introduction processing, our whole network activity as a large data set, I think we get a lot quicker results about finding the people who we really need to talk to right here, right now, and avoid wasting time communicating with folks whom we simply cannot help at this point.
This is a really cool idea because, whenever you're doing networking, people are always talking about your circle of influence and all of the people that you know. But when you go to a networking thing and you meet somebody, you really have no way of knowing who they know unless you get on social media and backtrack to their connections or their friends or whoever and like kind of look at what that person is and maybe look at this. Zero people have time for that, because if you're actually working, you're like, if you're doing your job, you don't have time to be doing that. So you have to rely on the person that you meet to introduce you to someone that they know. And you have to find a way to ask a question to say, I need to meet a person who is blank. And then you have to say that to them. And then it has to trigger them to remember the person they know that does the thing or that fits that qualification that you said. So there's kind of a lot that has to go into it. And it sounds like the idea behind your system is to remove that barrier of us having to rely on our memory to figure out who's a good connection for who or whom, I guess, what did I say it right? Had a grammar moment there.
I need my grammar book.
You need your grammar book. Okay, I'll Google the grammar thing later. I'm gonna get emails now. People are gonna be like, somebody's gonna fix that, and they're gonna tell me, because the people that know that, it's important to them. So this is kind of a really cool concept of if we're in your system and I meet somebody new, it will kind of let me know who is out there that might match with them and give them the opportunity to say yes or no if they feel like that's a good match. Am I getting it right?
Yes. And I would say, on the topic of the system being the one that makes the suggestions based off of the feedback that everyone's providing about, here's what made this introduction great. Here's why I didn't accept this intro. We're still working on that. But in the meantime, we built out the workflow part, where if you want to make an intro to someone but just don't have the time to do that right, well, build out that person's profile one time. You'll never have to do it again, or at least you want to do it for a very long time, unless they suddenly change and everything about them is very different. And even then, you can ask them via our system to update their own information if that needs to be updated. So beyond that, while we're getting to that point of saying like, hey, Camille, I just met with these 5 people this week, and based on what you've been looking for and been successful with in the past of your introductions, I think 2 of these people are going to be the good fit for you. And I didn't make that suggestion. The system did, because it was the one that recognized the opportunity. And whether or not those folks ended up being successful or not, that just becomes more data points. we're next. That's the next thing on our
That's
plate.
the next thing. Yeah, that would be really cool because, I've met hundreds of people, and relying on my memory to remember that the person I met 3 years ago is the person that you need to meet today, that's spotty. I've slept a lot of time since then. So
Also, 3 years from now, 3 years is a lot of time for things to change, right? So keeping
sure
up to
is.
date with each person in and of itself is really tough.
Mhm.
And I think digital networking has made us overzealous and given us way too many people to talk to.
Yeah.
And so as a result, we even have even less information about even more people.
Right. Right. Yeah. More people and less info. So this would be more info on as many people as you want, that you don't have to remember all the info at the same time. So
Because
easier to access.
we scale you out of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. I think this is a really neat concept. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. This has been so much fun.
It was an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate this. I never get to wear this costume otherwise.
Right? For those who were just listening, we are both wearing unicorn costumes. And this was Conrad's suggestion. He's like, I need to wear my unicorn costume. And I was like, well, I haven't been a unicorn yet. Let's do it. So jump on Instagram and then you can see us in our costumes. If you want to get in touch with Conrad, he loves communicating by email. So you can send an email to cruiz@wellaware.me. Thank you as well to all of our listeners and viewers. I'm your host, Camille Diaz. I'm a business optimization coach, financial educator, author, and speaker. You can contact me and find out what I'm up to through my website, CamilleDiaz.com. Follow me on social media at Cam Unfiltered. Be sure to follow Money Heart at Money Heart Show, and our website is moneyheartshow.com. Today's money mantra provided by Conrad is, money is time. Thanks so much.